There is a moment, quiet and almost invisible, when you stop reaching for someone who never reached back. You don't announce it. You don't send a final message. You simply stop, and in that stillness, something strange begins. The very person who ignored your presence starts to feel your absence. The one who took your effort for granted starts to wonder where the effort went. This is not a trick. It is not a strategy to win anyone back. It is something older and truer than that. It is what happens when a person finally returns to their own center and stops leaking themselves toward people who never valued the offering. Most people believe that if they love harder, give more, explain better, stay longer, the other person will finally see them. They believe attention is earned through persistence. They believe that being needed is the same as being valued. And so they chase approval, they chase closeness, they chase the smallest crumb of recognition from people who have already decided how little they will give. What no one tells you is that chasing does the opposite of what you hope. The more you pursue, the smaller you become in the eyes of the one you pursue. The harder you work to be seen, the more invisible you make yourself. Here is the truth that almost nobody says out loud. People do not notice you when you are trying to be noticed. They notice you when you stop needing them to. There is a kind of quiet strength that only appears when you withdraw your hunger for someone's approval, and that strength is felt long before it is understood. It moves into a room ahead of you. It changes how your voice lands and how your silence lands. It rearranges the way people speak to you without a single word being spoken about it. So this is what will be laid out for you today, plainly, without decoration. 3 things that happen the day you stop chasing. The first is that your absence begins to speak in a language your presence never could. The second is that the person's true regard for you finally becomes visible, because it is no longer hidden behind your effort. And the third is that you return to yourself, and in returning, you become someone worth noticing again. Not because you performed it, because you stopped performing at all. Sit with that. The day you stop chasing is the day they start noticing. And by the time they notice, you may find you no longer need them to. That is the strange gift buried inside all of this. The very thing you wanted arrives only after you have stopped needing it to arrive. And when it comes, you hold it differently, because you are no longer starving for it. You receive it the way a person who has eaten well receives a small extra portion, with pleasure but without hunger. That is the whole difference. That is everything. Let's begin with why this is real, before naming a single sign of it. Consider what actually happens in a relationship where one person gives more than the other. It does not begin with cruelty. It rarely does. It begins with an imbalance so small that no one sees it. One person cares a little more. One person reaches a little further. And the other person, without deciding anything consciously, learns that they can relax. They learn that they do not have to reach, because the reaching is being done for them. They learn that they can take, because the giving will continue regardless. This is the quiet arithmetic of every one-sided bond. The more you give without being met, the more the other person learns they can receive without giving. You are not teaching them to love you. You are teaching them how little they need to do to keep you. Every unanswered gesture is a lesson. Every ignored effort is an instruction. And the lesson is always the same. This person will stay, no matter what I do. So I will do nothing. Watch how this settles over months and years. In the beginning, they might have wondered whether you would leave. That wondering kept a small flame of attention alive in them. But you extinguished the wondering with your reliability. You proved, again and again, that no coldness would drive you off, that no neglect would cost them your presence. And once a person is certain of you, they stop paying attention to you. Certainty is the death of attention. This is not because they are wicked. It is because human beings look toward what is uncertain and away from what is guaranteed. There is something almost mechanical in this, and understanding it can free you from taking it personally. The mind gives its attention to what it might lose. It relaxes about what it cannot lose. You have felt this yourself in 100 small ways. The thing you were sure of, you stopped tending. The person who never wavered, you took for granted. This is not a flaw in others. It is the shape of the human mind, and you carry the same shape. So when you see it turned against you, do not read it as proof that you are unlovable. Read it as proof that you have made yourself too certain to be seen. People calibrate their treatment of you to the self-regard they observe in you. This is one of the oldest truths about human beings, and it holds in every kind of relationship. A friendship, a marriage, a family tie, a working bond. When someone watches you chase them, they do not see love, they see availability. They see a person who has decided they are worth less than the one they pursue. And people rarely value what announces its own low price. Think about how this works in the smallest moments. You send a message and you watch the screen, waiting. You rearrange your day around someone who would not rearrange a single hour around you. You laugh a little louder at their jokes, listen a little harder to their troubles, forgive a little faster when they wound you. And all of it, every piece of it, tells them the same thing. You are safe. You do not have to try. She will always be here. Notice how each of these small signals accumulates. No single gesture betrays you. It is the pattern that speaks. One eager reply means nothing. 10,000 of them, sent to someone who answers on their own leisurely schedule, forms a portrait of a person who values their own time less than they value another's. And the other person reads that portrait without effort. They do not analyze it. They absorb it. Long before they could put words to it, they know, in the way animals know weather, that with you they can rest, and with you they never need to reach. There is a difference between being liked and being valued, and this is where it lives. A person can enjoy your company and still not respect your presence. A person can be entertained by you and still not treasure you. Being liked costs them nothing. Being valued means they would feel your loss. And the terrible thing about chasing is that it removes the possibility of loss entirely. If you never withdraw, they never miss you. If you are always there, your presence stops being felt, the way you stop hearing a clock that has ticked in the same room for years. Notice how the clock only becomes audible when it stops. You spend years not hearing it, and then one day the ticking ends, and the silence is deafening. That is what your presence has become to the person you chase, constant, unnoticed, woven so deeply into the background of their day that they no longer register it at all. And this is why your absence can say what your presence never could. Not because absence is a weapon, because absence restores contrast. When you are always available, you become the background of someone's life. When you step back, you become visible again, if only because the space you filled is suddenly empty. The person who never noticed the light finally notices the dark. But here is something almost nobody sees. The point of stepping back is not to make them notice. The moment you step back in order to be noticed, you are still chasing. You have simply hidden the chase behind a colder face. You have turned your reaching into a kind of waiting, and waiting for someone to notice your withdrawal is only chasing dressed in quieter clothes. The real shift, the one that changes everything, happens when you stop chasing because you have remembered your own worth, not to provoke a reaction, because the pursuit has finally become beneath your dignity. There is a kind of self-respect that will not allow you to keep knocking on a door that stays shut. It is not anger. It is not pride. It is a quiet recognition that a person who wanted to open the door would have opened it by now. This recognition arrives slowly for most people because hope is stubborn and the heart is patient. You keep believing that the next gesture will be the one that finally lands. You keep thinking that if you just explain yourself clearly enough, they will understand and change. They will not change because you explained yourself better. The cost of explaining yourself to someone committed to misreading you is your own peace, spent for nothing. Some people are not confused about your worth. They have simply decided it. And no amount of clarity from you will move a decision they made for their own convenience. This is one of the hardest truths a person ever learns, that understanding is not the problem, that they understood you perfectly and chose to give you less anyway. Let that truth sit heavy for a moment, because most of your effort has been built on the opposite assumption. You have believed that the distance between you was a misunderstanding, a bridge that better words could cross. So you kept refining your words. You kept softening your tone, choosing your moments, rehearsing the perfect way to make them see. And every time, you walked away confused. Because the words were good and the seeing never came. The reason the seeing never came is that there was nothing to correct. They saw you. They simply decided you were worth less effort than you were giving. No sentence you construct can undo a decision like that. There is a particular grief in this, and it is worth naming so you can move through it rather than around it. It is the grief of realizing you were never fighting a misunderstanding. You were fighting a preference. They preferred to keep you close and give you little, and that preference served them. And so they had no reason to change it. Your explanations were never going to reach them, because your explanations assumed they wanted more from you than they had. They did not. They had exactly the arrangement they wanted, and you were the only one trying to renegotiate it. Once you see this, the endless effort loses its logic, and something in you finally puts down the weight. When you finally see this, something in you settles. The chasing stops, not because you are giving up, but because you are growing up in a way that has nothing to do with age. You are learning discernment. You are learning to tell the difference between a person who is temporarily busy and a person who is permanently unavailable to you. And once you can tell the difference, you stop wasting your reaching on ground that will never hold it. This is where your dignity begins to protect you, not by making you hard, but by making you still. You stop performing for people who were never your audience. You stop auditioning for a role that was already given to someone else. You draw your energy back into yourself, and in that gathering, you become whole again. A whole person does not chase. A whole person waits to be met, and is entirely at peace if the meeting never comes. That peace is not resignation. It is the quiet strength of someone who no longer hands their sense of worth to another person to hold. Now let us name the first thing that happens, the first sign that the shift has truly begun. The first sign is that your silence starts to carry weight. When you stop chasing, you stop filling every gap with your voice, your explanations, your reaching out. And that silence does something no argument ever accomplished. It creates a space the other person has to sit inside. For the first time, they are not being pursued, and the absence of your pursuit is louder than any word you could have said. Understand why this happens. When you are chasing someone, your constant presence acts like a cushion. It absorbs the consequences of their behavior. They can be careless with you because you rush in to smooth it over. They can neglect you because you refuse to let the neglect stand. Your reaching protects them from ever feeling what they are doing. But when you go quiet, the cushion is gone. Now they feel the shape of their own conduct, unsoftened, for the first time. There is a particular kind of comfort that your effort has been providing them, and it is worth naming. When you always reach first, they never have to face the question of whether they would have reached at all. Your speed erases the test. They never discover their own indifference, because you never give it room to appear, but silence gives it room. Silence hands them back the responsibility you have been carrying for both of you. And some people, faced with that responsibility, will rise to it. Others will simply let the silence stretch, and in doing so, they will tell you everything. Silence is not the same as sulking. Sulking is a demand dressed as quiet. Sulking waits, arms crossed, for the other person to notice the wound and come running. But real silence, the kind that comes from restored self-respect, has no demand in it at all. It is not waiting for anything. It is simply the sound of a person who has stopped spending words where they were never received, and people can feel the difference. They can feel when your quiet is a plea and when your quiet is a boundary. The difference is not in what you say, because in both cases you say nothing. The difference is in what is happening inside you. Sulking is full of hope and resentment, both of them pointed outward, both of them still tethered to the other person. A boundary is full of nothing pointed outward at all. It is simply you, occupying your own life, no longer arranging yourself around their response. And though the outward silence may look identical, people feel the inward difference with startling accuracy. They can tell when your quiet still needs them, and they can tell when it has let them go. The second kind is the one that carries weight. Here is what silence does. That argument cannot. Argument gives the other person something to push against. Every time you explain, complain, or plead, you hand them a target, and they can dodge it, twist it, dismiss it. But silence gives them nothing to fight. There is no accusation to deny, no demand to resist, no complaint to minimize. There is only the space where your effort used to be, and they are left alone in it with their own conscience. You cannot argue someone into valuing you, but you can stop arguing and let the emptiness make the point that words never could. Consider a person who has spent years being the one who always calls first, always reaches first, always mends the silence when it grows too long. Then one day, she simply stops. She does not announce it. She does not send a cold, final word. She just no longer picks up the thread she always carried. Days pass. The silence she used to fill now sits untouched. And on the other end, the person who never noticed the calls begins to notice their absence. The quiet they never valued becomes the only thing they can hear. Watch what happens inside her during those same days. At first, she is restless. Her hand reaches for the phone out of habit a dozen times, and a dozen times she sets it down. The urge to fill the silence feels almost physical, like a held breath. But somewhere around the third day, something eases. The restlessness gives way to a strange spaciousness. She realizes the effort she was pouring out had been exhausting her in ways she never let herself feel. And in the quiet, she begins to hear her own thoughts again. Thoughts that had been drowned out for years by the constant noise of reaching toward someone who never reached back. This is the quiet strength of restraint. Restraint is not weakness holding back. It is strength choosing not to spend itself. When you no longer chase, every word you do not say becomes a form of self-respect. You are telling yourself, without speaking it aloud, that your voice will not be given to people who do not listen. And a person who guards their own voice this way carries a presence that fills a room without any effort at all. There is a dignity and restraint that people feel before they can name it. The person who does not rush to explain themselves, who does not scramble to correct every impression, who lets a silence stand rather than fill it with anxious words, carries themselves differently. Their carriage changes. They move through the world as someone who does not need to justify their existence to anyone in the room. And that composure, that refusal to spend themselves cheaply, is precisely what draws respect, not the reaching, the restraint. The world leans toward the person who is not leaning toward it. So what do you do with this? You practice the silence that comes from peace, not from strategy. If you find yourself going quiet only to see whether they will finally reach out, you are still chasing, and your silence will feel like a trap even to you. Instead, let your silence come from a settled place. Stop the messages you send only to keep the connection alive on your side alone. Stop the explanations you offer to someone who has already made up their mind. Let the quiet be clean. Let it be the natural stillness of a person who has stopped pouring water into a cup with no bottom. And notice how much calmer you become the moment you stop. Practice it first in small ways, so the muscle is built before the large test comes. When someone says something careless and you feel the familiar rush to smooth it over, hold the pause for one breath longer than is comfortable. When a message goes unanswered and you feel the pull to send another, let the first one stand alone. These small restraints are training. They teach your nervous system that the silence will not swallow you, that you can sit in an unanswered space without rushing to fill it. And once your body learns that, the larger silences stop frightening you. You begin to carry quiet the way a strong person carries stillness, as a possession rather than a punishment. There is one more practice worth learning here, and it is the practice of the delayed response that comes not from calculation but from living. When a message arrives and you feel the old reflex to answer this instant, let yourself finish what you were doing first. Not to make them wait, to honor your own life as something that does not stop the moment they appear. The habit of instant availability is not devotion. It is a kind of standing at attention, waiting to be summoned. And a person who stands at attention their whole life never learns that they were allowed to sit down. Let yourself sit down. Answer when your own life gives you a natural pause, not when your anxiety demands it. Now the second thing. This one is harder to accept, but it may be the most freeing of all. The second sign is that the truth of how they feel about you finally becomes visible. As long as you are chasing, you can never know what someone truly feels, because your effort is doing all the work. You are keeping the bond alive by force. And a bond kept alive by one person's force tells you nothing about the other person's heart. Only when you stop can you finally see what was real. This is why so many people are afraid to stop chasing. Deep down they suspect what they will find. They're afraid that if they step back, the whole thing will collapse, and they are right to be afraid, because sometimes it does. But here is what must be understood. If it collapses the moment you stop holding it up alone, it was already gone. You were not maintaining a relationship. You were performing a solo act and calling it a duet. Stopping does not break something that was whole. It reveals something that was already broken. There is a strange mercy in this, for as long as you keep reaching, you get to keep hoping. And hope, however sweet, can keep you tied for years to something that was never going to give you what you needed. The day you stop is the day you finally get the truth. And the truth, even when it hurts, is kinder than a hope that feeds on your own effort forever. A clean grief is better than an endless ache. You can heal from a clean grief. You cannot heal from a wound you keep reopening with your own hands. When you withdraw your chasing, one of two things happens, and both of them are useful to you. Either the person steps forward, revealing that they did value you and simply grew comfortable, or the person disappears, revealing that your effort was the only thing holding them there. Both answers are gifts. The first gives you a relationship worth having. The second gives you back your time, your energy, and your dignity. There is no outcome here that leaves you worse than the chasing did. Sit with how freeing that is. You have been living in a fog of uncertainty, never quite sure where you stand, and that uncertainty has cost you more than any clear answer ever could. The not knowing is what kept you reaching. It whispered that maybe the next gesture would tip the balance, that maybe you had simply not tried the right thing yet. But when you stop, the fog lifts. You get an answer, and an answer, however it lands, is solid ground. You can build a life on solid ground. You cannot build a life on a maybe that never resolves. Understand how much energy the uncertainty itself has been consuming. It is not only the reaching that exhausts you. It is the constant, low, humming question underneath everything. Where do I stand? Do they care? Was that coldness a mood or a message? You have carried that question through your days like a stone in your pocket, and you have grown so used to its weight that you no longer notice how it slows you. When the answer finally comes, whatever it is, the stone leaves your pocket. You walk lighter. Even a painful answer weighs less than the endless not knowing, because at least it lets you stop searching. Notice the contempt that sometimes hides in comfort. A person who has grown too comfortable with your reaching can develop a quiet contempt for it, not hatred, something colder, a mild indifference that treats your devotion as furniture, always there, never remarked upon. And the moment you stop, that indifference is exposed for what it was. You see, at last, whether you were loved or merely used to being available. And once you have seen it clearly, you cannot unsee it, and you would not want to. Contempt of this kind is subtle, and it hides well behind ordinary manners. It shows in the way your good news is received without warmth and your troubles are met without curiosity. It shows in the half-attention, the delayed reply, the way your presence is accepted but never sought. You may have spent years calling this normal, adjusting yourself to expect less, telling yourself that this is simply how they are. But it is not simply how they are. It is how they are with you, because you have taught them that with you, this is enough. When you stop, and the effort is no longer there to absorb it, that quiet contempt has nowhere left to hide. Watch how the same person behaves with those they are not sure of. You will often find they are attentive, prompt, curious, warm toward the very people who give them less than you do. This is the hardest thing to see, and the most important. It proves the coldness was never their nature. It was their calibration. They give warmth where warmth might be withdrawn, and they withhold it where they know it will be given freely regardless. You have been receiving the treatment reserved for the guaranteed, and nothing changes that treatment except becoming, once again, a person who is not guaranteed. Think of a person who spent a long season believing that if she just stayed patient enough, the one she loved would finally turn toward her. She waited. She reached. She excused every disappointment. And then, worn thin, She stopped, not in anger, in exhaustion. And in the stillness that followed, she saw the whole thing clearly for the first time. The turning toward her was never coming. It had never been coming. Her effort had been the only warmth in a room she thought they shared. That seeing was a betrayal to face, but it was also the beginning of her freedom. Discernment is the gift hidden inside this sign. Discernment is the ability to see people as they actually are, not as your hope insists they must be. And you cannot have discernment while you are chasing, because chasing requires you to keep looking away from the truth. Only detachment lets you see clearly. When you stop needing a particular outcome, your eyes open. You begin to notice who reaches back and who never did. You begin to feel the difference between people who meet you and people who merely receive you. Detachment is a word that frightens people because they hear coldness in it. But detachment is not coldness. It is the ability to care about someone without being controlled by your need for them. It is love with its eyes open. When you are attached in the desperate way, you cannot afford to see clearly, because clear sight might cost you the thing you cannot bear to lose. Detachment removes that fear. It lets you look directly at a person and see them whole, the good and the indifferent alike, without flinching, because your peace no longer depends on what you find. So what do you do with this sign? You stop protecting yourself from the truth. When you catch yourself making excuses for someone's absence, pause and ask a harder question. Not why did they not reach out, but what does their silence tell me about where I stand? Let the answer land, even if it stings. Stop interpreting neglect as busyness and indifference as complexity. Most of the time, people are not complicated. They are simply showing you their priorities, and you are not on the list. See it. And once you see it, let it inform how much of yourself you continue to offer. Keep a quiet record, not on paper, but in your honest awareness of who initiates and who responds. For a few weeks, simply observe without adjusting your behavior to rescue anyone. Notice who reaches toward you when you are not reaching toward them. Notice whose warmth arrives on its own and whose only appears when you summon it. This is not scorekeeping in the petty sense. It is discernment gathering its evidence. And at the end of it, you will know, with a certainty you have never had before, exactly who has been meeting you and who has only been receiving you. There is a second observation to make alongside the first, and it is subtler. Watch how people respond not to your reaching, but to your boundaries. When you finally say no, or go quiet, or decline to smooth something over, notice who meets that with respect and who meets it with punishment. A person who values you will adjust to your boundary, perhaps with some discomfort, but without cruelty. A person who only valued your usefulness will react to your boundary as if you have committed an offense, because to them you have. You have stopped serving your assigned function. Their reaction tells you, more clearly than any warm moment ever could, what you were to them all along. Now the third thing people miss, and it is the one that changes you permanently. The third sign is that you come back to yourself. All that energy you were pouring outward into someone who never returned it suddenly has nowhere to go but home. And when it comes home, you begin to remember who you were before you started chasing. You remember the interests you set aside, the peace you traded away, the carriage you used to have before you bent yourself to fit someone who never made room for you. Chasing is expensive in a way that is hard to measure while you are doing it. It does not only cost you time, it costs you your center. Every day you spend managing someone else's regard for you, you spend a little less time being yourself. You become an expert on their moods and a stranger to your own. You learn to read every flicker of their face, and you forget the sound of your own thoughts. And this is the quiet tragedy of the chaser. Not that they lose the other person, that they lose themselves in the pursuit. Think of how much of your attention has been living outside your own body. It has been stationed at their door, watching for signs of favor. It has been posted by your phone, waiting for a name to appear. It has been rehearsing conversations that never happen and interpreting silences that mean nothing. All that attention is yours. It is a finite and precious thing, and you have been spending it on someone who never even knew you were spending it. When you stop chasing, that attention comes home, and you suddenly have far more of yourself to live with than you realized you had lost. So when you stop, something begins to return. It comes back slowly at first, like feeling returning to a limb you have been sitting on. You notice small things. A morning where you do not check to see if they responded. An afternoon that belongs entirely to you. A meal you enjoy without wondering what they are doing. These are not small things at all. They are the first signs of a self that is coming back to life after a long absence. Solitude, which you feared, turns out to be the very thing that heals you. There is a difference between loneliness and solitude, and the chaser rarely knows it, because they have been running from both. Loneliness is the ache of missing someone. Solitude is the fullness of being with yourself. When you stop chasing, you may pass through loneliness first, and that passage is hard. But if you stay, loneliness gives way to solitude, and solitude returns you to a peace you had forgotten you were allowed to have. The passage between them is the part most people cannot survive, and it is worth knowing what it feels like so you are not frightened when it comes. In the first days, the quiet feels like a room emptied of furniture, echoing and cold. You will be tempted to fill it, to call, to reach, to end the discomfort by any means. This is the crucial hour. If you can stay in the empty room without furnishing it with someone else's presence, the echo softens. The cold warms. And slowly the emptiness reveals itself to be not absence, but space. Room to breathe, room to think, room to become someone whole. Loneliness is the empty room feared. Solitude is the same room finally inhabited by you. Consider what solitude gives back to a person who has spent decades being needed. For years, you were defined by your usefulness to others. You were the one who held things together, the one who reached, the one who kept the peace and carried the weight. And in all that giving, you lost track of who you were apart from what you did for people. Solitude gives that person back to you. It reminds you that you existed before you were needed, and you will exist after, and that self is worth knowing. This is a particular kind of homecoming, and it belongs especially to those who have given the most years away. If you have spent decades being the one everyone leaned on, you may not even remember what you wanted before you learned to want what others needed from you. Solitude is where that memory returns. In the quiet, without anyone to serve, you begin to hear a smaller, older voice, the one that had preferences and curiosities before it had duties. That voice was never gone. It was only drowned out. And solitude is the one condition under which it can finally be heard again. There is grace in this returning, not the grace of being forgiven, but the grace of a person who has found their own composure again. You begin to carry yourself differently. You stand a little taller, not out of pride, but out of self-possession. Your presence changes, because a person who is at home in themselves gives off a settledness that others can feel across a room. And here is the irony that runs through everything being said today. This is precisely when people start to notice you, not when you were chasing them, when you stopped needing them at all. The world responds to your self-regard. When you value yourself, others sense it and adjust. When you stop valuing yourself, they sense that too. This is not fair, and it is not something you can argue with. It is simply how people are. They read your relationship with yourself, and they mirror it back to you. So, the surest way to change how you are treated is to change how you treat yourself. And nothing changes that faster than pulling your energy back from those who drain it and returning it to your own life. So what do you do with this third sign? You reclaim the ground you gave away. Make a short list of the things you stopped doing when the chasing began. The walks you no longer take. The people you stopped calling because all your caring went in one direction. The quiet pleasures you abandoned. Then begin, gently, to take them back, one at a time. Not to fill the emptiness. To reoccupy your own life. Every hour you reclaim for yourself is an hour you are no longer offering to someone who never valued the offering. Do this without waiting to feel ready, because the feeling follows the action, not the other way around. You will not wake one morning suddenly wanting to return to your old life. You return to it first, a little clumsily, and the wanting arrives while you are already there. Take the walk before you feel like walking. Sit with the book before you feel like reading. Reach for the friendship before you feel worthy of it. The self you are trying to recover is built one reclaimed hour at a time, and it does not require your enthusiasm, only your willingness to begin. Now, let us turn to what you actually do with all of this, in practical terms, starting today. The first category of action lives inside your own mind, because that is where the chasing truly begins. Before you ever send a message or wait by a phone, there is a thought. And the thought is usually this: if I do more, they will care more. You must learn to catch this thought and question it, because it is the root of everything. More does not create care. It never has. Care that must be earned through excessive effort is not care. It is a performance you are funding, and the funding never ends. So when you feel the pull to reach out one more time, to explain one more time, to prove yourself one more time, pause. Ask yourself a plain question. Would a person who valued me require this much effort to notice me? The answer is almost always no. And in that no, you find the strength to keep your hand still. This is where boundaries begin, not in what you say to others, but in what you refuse to talk yourself into. Practice the discipline of the unsent message. When you feel the urge to reach toward someone who does not reach back, write the message if you must, but do not send it. Set it down. Wait a day. You will find, more often than not, that the urgency was not about them at all. It was about your own discomfort with the silence. And when you can sit inside that discomfort without acting on it, you have taken back a great deal of power. You have learned that silence will not kill you. It will strengthen you. There is a second mental discipline worth learning alongside it, and it is the practice of noticing your own narration. When someone disappoints you, your mind rushes to build a story that protects them, and therefore protects your hope. He must be overwhelmed at work. She has always been bad at replying. They did not mean it the way it sounded. Catch these stories as they form. Ask whether you would accept the same excuse if the roles were reversed, if you had treated them the way they are treating you. Usually you would not. And in that honest comparison, the story loosens its grip, and you begin to see the treatment plainly, without the softening lens your hope keeps applying. Learn also to sit with being misunderstood. This is one of the hardest disciplines of the mind, because everything in you wants to be seen correctly. But some people will misunderstand you no matter how clearly you explain, because the misunderstanding serves them. The moment you accept that you cannot correct a mind that does not want to be corrected, you are free. You stop spending your peace on their perception. You let them think what they will, and you keep your dignity intact. There is quiet strength in letting yourself be wrongly seen and refusing to argue about it. There is a third mental discipline, and it is the practice of separating your worth from their response. This is the deepest work and the slowest. For most of your life, you may have measured your value by how others received you. A warm reply meant you were worthy. A cold one meant you had failed at something. As long as your worth rises and falls with their treatment of you, you will chase, because you will be trying to secure your own value through their behavior. The discipline is to notice again and again that their response describes them, not you. A person's indifference is information about their heart, not a verdict on your worth. Learn to hold your value in your own hands, where no one else's mood can reach it, and the entire compulsion to chase begins to lose its fuel. The second category of action lives in your behavior, in what you actually do and stop doing. And the first behavioral change is the simplest and the hardest. Stop initiating with people who never initiate with you, not as punishment, as an experiment in truth. For one honest stretch of time, let the reaching be theirs. Do not disappear dramatically. Do not make a show of your withdrawal. Simply let the natural balance reveal itself. See who comes toward you when you stop coming toward them. This will feel unbearable at first, because you will confuse your withdrawal with cruelty. It is not cruelty. You are not obligated to sustain, single-handedly, a bond that only you are carrying. Letting a one-sided connection go quiet is not an act of aggression. It is an act of honesty. You are simply stopping the pretense that the effort was mutual, and whatever survives that honesty is worth keeping. Whatever does not survive, it was already gone. Change your response time, not to play a game, but to break a habit. If you are the person who answers instantly, who drops everything the moment they call, notice what that instant availability has taught them. It has taught them that your time is theirs for the taking. There is nothing wrong with living your own life fully enough that you are not always waiting. Let your responses come from your real life, at the pace of a person who has one, rather than from a phone clutched in anticipation. This is not about making them wait. It is about no longer waiting yourself. Learn also to stop overgiving in the moment, the small compulsive offerings that fill every silence, the unnecessary favor, the gift that was not asked for, the extra reassurance handed to someone who gave no sign of needing it. These reflexive gifts feel like love, but often they are anxiety wearing love's face, a way of buying a security that cannot be bought. When you feel the reflex to overgive, pause and let the moment breathe without your offering in it. See whether the other person fills the space or whether they simply wait, comfortable, for you to fill it, as you always have. What you learn in that pause is worth more than anything your giving could have purchased. There is a further behavioral discipline, and it is learning to let a request go unanswered when it is unreasonable. You have likely trained yourself to treat every ask as an emergency, to reorder your whole day around a need that someone tossed toward you casually, expecting you to catch it as you always do. Practice, sometimes, not catching it. Let the request sit. Let the other person solve it themselves, or wait, or ask someone else. You will feel a guilt so sharp it may surprise you. Sit with the guilt without obeying it. That guilt is not your conscience. It is the alarm of a habit being broken, and it will quiet down once the habit is gone. And learn to walk away from conversations that diminish you, in the moment, without ceremony. When someone speaks to you with contempt, you do not have to stay and absorb it in the hope that staying will soften them. You can simply end the conversation. You can put the phone down. You can leave the room. Walking away is not losing the argument. It is refusing to participate in your own diminishment. And a person who will calmly walk away from disrespect teaches others, without a single word, exactly how they must be spoken to. Notice that walking away does not require anger, and it is stronger when it has none. The most powerful departure is the calm one, the one made without slamming a door or delivering a speech. You simply recognize that the conversation has stopped being worthy of your presence, and you remove your presence. No drama announces it. No final word underlines it. You just are no longer there to be spoken to that way. Composure like this unsettles people far more than fury ever could, because fury tells them they still have power over you, and composure tells them they do not. The third category of action is the hardest and the most important. It is the rebuilding of a life full enough that no single person can hold that much power over your peace. When one relationship becomes the center of your entire emotional world, you will always chase it, because losing it feels like losing everything. The way out is not to care less about them. It is to build a life wide enough that they are one part of it, not the whole of it. So widen your life on purpose. Fill your days with things that belong to you alone. Tend to friendships that are mutual, where the reaching goes both ways. Return to the work of your own hands, whatever that means for you. Build a routine of small pleasures that no one can take from you, because they depend on no one but yourself. A morning ritual, a daily walk, a practice that steadies you. These things become the floor beneath your feet. And when you have a floor, you stop clinging to the ceiling. Think of it as spreading your weight. When all your emotional weight rests on one relationship, that relationship bows under it, and so do you. Every wobble becomes a crisis, because everything is riding on it. But when your weight is spread across a full life, across several warm connections, across work that means something to you, and habits that hold you steady, no single person carries the impossible burden of being your entire world. And relieved of that burden, the relationships that remain can breathe. You will be astonished how much lighter your bonds become the moment you stop asking any one of them to hold everything. Protect your peace as though it were the most valuable thing you own, because it is. Every day, notice what drains you and what restores you, and slowly rearrange your life to have more of the second and less of the first. This is not selfishness. A person whose peace is intact has more to give the world than a person who has poured themselves empty chasing someone who never cared. You guard your peace not to withhold yourself, but to remain someone worth being near. And build your resilience deliberately, the way you would build strength in a body. Resilience does not come from avoiding difficulty. It comes from surviving it and noticing that you survived. Every time you resist the urge to chase, every time you sit through the discomfort of silence, every time you let a misunderstanding stand uncorrected, you are building endurance. And endurance is what will carry you through the lonely stretch between letting go of what was false and receiving what is true. Stay. The strength is being built even when you cannot feel it. There is one more piece to this rebuilding. and it is the practice of keeping small promises to yourself. Every time you say you will take the walk and then take it, you prove to yourself that your word to yourself means something. Every time you say you will not send the message and then do not send it, you deposit a little more trust into your own account. This is how self-respect is actually built, not through grand declarations, but through the quiet accumulation of promises kept. A person who keeps faith with themselves stops needing others to keep faith with them, because the well they drink from is one they filled themselves. And there is a final piece, quieter than the rest, which is learning to enjoy your own company as though it were good company. Not to endure yourself, to enjoy yourself. Sit down to a meal you prepared with the same care you would bring to a guest. Take yourself somewhere you have wanted to go, and do not wait for a companion to make it worthwhile. When you begin to treat your own presence as valuable, something shifts in how you carry yourself into every other room. You stop arriving hungry. You stop needing to be filled by others because you have learned to fill yourself. And a person who arrives full is treated entirely differently than a person who arrives empty and pleading. Now consider what is at stake if none of this is done. Consider what happens to a person who never learns to stop. There was a woman who spent nearly 40 years being the one who reached. In every relationship she ever had, she was the one who called first, forgave first, bent first. She believed, with her whole heart, that love was measured by how much you were willing to give, and so she gave until there was almost nothing left of her. She told herself that her patience would be rewarded, that one day the people she chased would finally turn and see how much she had offered them. They never turned, not because they were monsters, but because they never had to. She had made herself so endlessly available that her presence stopped registering at all. She was the air they breathed without noticing. And in her later years, when her strength began to fade and she could no longer reach as far or as often, she made a devastating discovery. The people she had chased her whole life did not come toward her when she could no longer come toward them. They simply drifted, the way people drift from a habit that has ended. And she was left with the silence she had spent a lifetime trying to fill. This is the true cost of never learning to stop. It is not only the relationships that disappoint you. It is the self you never got to become because you spent it all on people who never valued the spending. She had been so busy reaching that she never asked what her own hands might have built if they had not always been outstretched toward others. She never found her own solitude because she was too afraid of it, and so it found her anyway, at the end, uninvited and unprepared for. Think of everything that self might have held. There were talents she never developed because every spare hour went to managing someone else's affection. There were friendships with people who would have met her fully, but she never had the energy for them, because her energy was already committed to those who gave nothing back. There was a version of her that walked through the world with quiet strength and easy composure, and that version was never born, because the woman who might have become her was too busy chasing to sit still long enough to grow. The greatest loss was never any of the people. It was her. And notice the cruelest part of the arithmetic. All those years of reaching did not even buy her the love she was reaching for. She paid the full price and received almost nothing in return. Had the chasing at least secured devotion, one might call it a hard bargain, but it secured nothing. The very act of chasing guaranteed that the thing she chased would keep its distance. She spent her whole fortune of self on a purchase that was never for sale, and she died still believing that if she had only given a little more, the sale would finally have closed. It would not have. It never would have. That is the truth she was never given, and it is the truth you are being given now. But there is another version of that story, and it belongs to anyone still listening. Somewhere in her long life, that same woman had a moment, more than one, where she could have stopped, where the truth was right in front of her, and she could have withdrawn her reaching and let the silence teach her what she needed to know. Every chaser has these moments. They arrive as exhaustion, as a quiet voice that says enough, as a sudden clear sight of how one-sided it has all been. The tragedy is not that the moments never come. It is that they come and we look away. You are being given one of those moments right now. The clarity you feel as these words land is not an accident. It is the part of you that has always known the truth finally being given permission to speak. The question is not whether you can see it. You can. The question is whether you will act on it before another year of your life is spent reaching toward people who were never going to reach back. Because here is what is truly at stake. Not just the peace you are losing now, but the person you could still become. There is a version of you that walks with quiet strength, that carries the composure of someone who no longer needs anyone's approval to feel whole. That version of you is not a fantasy. It is simply you, with the chasing removed. And every day you keep chasing is a day you postpone becoming her. The cost is not paid all at once. It is paid slowly, in small surrenders, until one day you look up and realize how much of yourself you gave away for so little in return. Do not let that be the whole of your story. There is still time to turn. And turning begins not with a grand decision, but with a single quiet choice made today. You do not have to fix a lifetime of reaching in an afternoon. You only have to stop reaching once, and then once more, and then let the small victories gather until they become a way of living. That is how a life is turned around, not with a single heroic act, but with a series of quiet ones no one else will ever see. So here is what to do before this day ends. Choose one person you have been chasing, one relationship where you have been doing all the reaching, and simply stop reaching for the length of a week. Do not announce it. Do not explain it. Just let your hand rest. Notice what rises in you when you do, and notice, too, what the silence reveals about them. Then take one thing you abandoned when the chasing began, one small pleasure or practice that was yours alone, and do it today. Take the walk. Make the call to a friend who actually calls you back. Return to the thing your own hands used to build. Reoccupy one small corner of your own life. And when the urge rises to reach toward the one who never reaches back, let that urge be the signal to turn instead toward yourself, toward something that restores you rather than drains you. And tonight, before you sleep, sit for a few minutes in the stillness you have been avoiding. Do not fill it with a screen or a voice or a worry. Just sit in it and let it be. Feel the quiet strength of a person who no longer needs to be chosen in order to feel whole. Notice how your own carriage changes when you stop bracing for someone else's response. That stillness is not empty. It is where you begin to rise. And the day you stop chasing is the day you finally come home to yourself.